Okay, let's get started with today's lesson. We're going to learn to find the percent of a number. So the key word in this goal is actually of, because we know what a percent is, we know what number is, but what does of mean? Try to think about that before we get started with our lesson. Don't forget to write today's date and page number down. And here is your warm-up. You have 5 questions that I want you to deal with. As you can see, you're multiplying a decimal by a whole number. Good luck. Come back when you're done, and don't forget to show your work. Don't try to do it all in your head. All right, here are the answers to these problems. So again, remember, when multiplying a decimal and a whole number, the only thing you have to do once you do all the math is just move the decimal over the amount of times you see. Now, every single one of these you can see went to the hundredths place value. I wonder if you can figure out why every number I had here went to the hundredths place value. What is it that we're learning about right now? Remember, we're learning about percent, and percent means out of 100, and when writing a decimal, you have to move the decimal point 2 places to get to the hundredths place value. That's why I did that, in case you didn't figure it out. All right, now that you got some practice here, this is exactly what we're going to be doing today, but we're going to have to get numbers to this point first. Let's talk about what I mean as we get into the next slide. Here's a scenario, like I said, here's a scenario that will deal directly with what we're learning today. So, you may know this already, but the human body is made up of mostly water. Yeah, you're mostly a water machine. In fact, about 67% of your body, which of the total is 100%, weight is in water. So you have a lot of water weight. So if Cameron weighs 90 pounds, about how much of his weight is water? Well, 90 pounds is exactly the 100% part of Cameron's body. And if 67% of that 90 is water, that's what we're trying to figure out. So remember, percent is out of 100. And since you know what Cameron's body is as a total, and you know how much of his body is water, we can set up a proportion and solve the problem that we're trying to work with. So down here, this is how we're going to be setting up our proportions to be able to figure out the percent of a number. So 67 out of 100. How do we get that? Remember, 67 is part of a whole. So 67 is the percentage out of 100. Now on the other side, we have no idea how much percentage he is or how much he weighs in water, but we do know that Cameron is 90 pounds. So once we set up a proportion like this, you can cross multiply and you'll be able to figure out how much Cameron weighs. So if you want to try solving this and coming to me and seeing if you get it right, give it a shot. There may be a reward in it for you before moving on. All right, there's no notes you have to write down. Let's get moving into how we can do this stuff. And here's our first problem we're going to look at. So let's say I told you to find the percent of each number. Now the hint here is the of part, which means that we're trying to find a part of. Of also means multiply, something to think about. So here we can see that 30% of 50 is what we're looking for. So we're not looking for what 50 is, we're looking for what chunk of 50 there is. So the first thing you have to do is write a proportion. Now this one, whenever you're dealing with the percent, will always be something over 100. Because remember, percent means out of 100. So you're always going to have, like this one, 30 being the percent over 100. Now again, we don't know how much there is of 30% of 50, but we do know the total. The total here, or the 100% part, is 50. So your proportion has to be equally set up. The percent on the top, the wholes on the bottom. Now, once we have this, we can then cross multiply to be able to figure out our work. So if we cross multiply 100 times n, you know that that is 100n. And then if you cross multiply the other way, 30 times 50, just think 3 times 5, that's 15. And then you just got to add the 2 zeros. Okay? Now that we've multiplied, so we set the cross products and multiplied, now we just have to divide by the coefficient next to the variable. So we have to divide both sides by 100 so that we can, as we say, isolate the n. So 100 divided by 100 is gone. So now we're left with n. And now all we have to do is divide 100 into 1,500. Now remember, they both share 2 zeros, so we can get rid of 2 zeros right away. And now when you look at it, it's just 15 divided by 1, which is 15. So your answer equals 15. What does that mean? Well, it means that 30% of 50 is, which means equal, I guess I don't have to write it both, is, I'll write the equal above it, 15. Okay? So have this example down for you, or write it down for yourself, and then we're going to look at least one other one. Now, that was a problem where we had a number less than 100%, but I wanted to remind you, if you were ever given something like 130%, 160%, 200%, whatever, whenever you're solving a problem that has a greater than 100%, remember, that's more than one whole. So it's kind of like having a mixed number or a whole number and a decimal, just to kind of give you a helpful hint there, but you don't need to write it down. And guess, surprise, surprise, I have a problem just like that. So we have to find the percent of each number. So you can see here that we have 200% of 24. Now remember, if we have a number larger than 100, that means our answer has to be greater than whatever we're looking at. So 200% has to be larger than 24. So whatever we get is going to be a larger number than 24. That's just a hint to you. So I set up my proportion the same, the percent there, and it's always out of 100. Okay? And we know that the part we're looking at is 24, so that's our whole, so it goes on the bottom. But the part we're looking for, we don't know, so I'm going to use the variable n again. So remember, once we write the proportion, the next step is to cross multiply, or find the cross product. So if I do 100 times n, that's 100n. And then 200 times 24, it looks like a really big number, but remember, what's 2 and 24? Well, 24 times 2 is 48. And then we just have to add the 2 zeros. Okay? Once we have that, remember we have to isolate the variable. So we have to divide both sides by 100 to get n alone. And when we do that, we're left with n here. Now remember, they both share 1 0, so we can cross it off. And they both share another 0. So now our math is really easy. It's just how many times does 1 go into 48? And that answer would be 48. So 48 is bigger than 24, and it should be because we have 200 and we have 100. The top number is larger than the bottom number, so we need to have a number that's larger on the top. So the answer is 48, or 200% of 24 is 48. So basically we're saying 200% of the 24 equals 48. So if you want to copy that one down as well, you can. All right, I'm going to keep 2 of these up here as practice problems if you want to come to me and do some additional practice. But the 2 I want you to try today on your own will be number 2 and number 4. Set up your proportion. So for example, number 2, you're going to set 38 over 100 because that's your percent. And then the 400, remember, 400 is the total number we're looking at. What we're trying to find out what it is what 38% of that would be. And the same over here, we have 180 over 100. So remember, our number is going to be a larger number than one whole. So when we set up our proportion of n over 90, we know that our answer up here has to be larger than 90. Come back when you're done. So here are the answers that you should have received for these. So you can see that 38% of 400, that came out to be 152, which makes sense that it's smaller than 400 because 38 is not one whole. And then for number 4, we had an 180% of 90, so the number had to be larger than 90, and 162 is larger, so that's how we knew that it was right. Okay, hopefully you got those right. If not, you can come to me and we can work on 1 and 3 if you'd like. All right, in example 2 today, I'm going to show you a different way that you can also figure out the number, and that's by turning your percent into a decimal. This one works really easy as well. So the only thing you really have to know for this is that you have to write the percent as a decimal and then multiply, because remember, the hint I was trying to show you in the goal is What does of mean? Of means multiply. So as long as you can change 9 into a decimal, which is real easy, we just got to move the decimal point twice. So you put a 0 there, and that's how we get 0.9 times 80. So 9 times 8 is 72, but then when you move the decimal over the amount of times you have, you get 7.2. So this is another way that works a little quicker. Now, let's think about how is 7.2 the correct answer? Well, 9% is not a very large number, is it? 9 out of 100? That's very far to the left on the number line if we made a percent number line from 0 to 100%. Now we know 100% of something is 80 here in this situation. So if you look, 7.2 is way down there. So it is a reasonable answer that 0.09 times 80 gives you 7.2, and that is a reasonable answer. It's a small value. So this thing on the bottom is just to kind of show you the reasonability or the proof of why 7.2 is the correct answer. So copy down the top part before moving on. All right, here's another one where you can see 3% of 12. Now 12 is not a big number itself. So when you're trying to find a real tiny part, or 3%, you know the number is going to have to be even tinier. So here, all we have to do is move the decimal twice on 3 to get 0.03 and multiply it by 12. Now you end up with a decimal of 36 hundredths, 0.36. Is that reasonable? Yeah, it is reasonable because remember, we're dealing with a small number and taking a small percentage of it. So this number is correct, so 0.36. So all we're doing is multiplying a decimal by a whole number. Now if you look, the work that you have to do is exactly the same kind of thing I had you do in your warm-up. If you look back at the warm-up problems, they were all decimals to the hundredths place value multiplied by a whole number. You were multiplying to figure out something like this already. All right, on your own, I want you to do 5 and 7. So all you're going to do is multiply these two. First, change them into a decimal, and then multiply them. Come back when you're done. We'll see how you did. So the results you should have got for 5 is 8. So when I do 0.16 times 50, I got 800. But then I moved the decimal twice, and it gave me an answer of 8. For 900 times 0.47, I did 7 times 0, which is 0, 7 times 0, which is 0, 7 times 9, which is 63. And then I crossed out the 7, put a 0 down here in that first place value, and then I continued from here. 0 times 4 is 0, 0 times 4 is 0, and 4 times 9 is 36. I got 42,300, but then I had to remember to move the decimal twice, and when I moved it twice, I ended up with 423. Both reasonable answers for what you're looking for. Now you could end up having to do word problems that deal with stuff like this. For example, the estimated world population in 2001 was 6,157 million. About 40% of the people were 19 or younger. That's like you guys. What was the approximate number of people that were 19 or younger? So again, you're trying to figure out what 14 or 40% of 6,157 is. So you can just simply multiply the two by changing the percent to a decimal. So 0.40 times 6,157. Now remember, 40% is close to 50, so you're looking for a number that's about half, just a little less though, than that 6,157. So when you multiply, you do get a number that's less than half. You get 2,462.8. So it did say about, so you could say the number of people that are 19 or younger was about 2,463 by rounding up, or you could say about 2,462.8 million. You have an option there. Okay? Let's take a look at one that I want you to try on your own now. It says, of the 450 students at Miller Middle School, 38% ride the bus to school. So find out how many kids that actually is out of the 450. Good luck. All right, so here's the answer I got. 271 students ride the bus. So I just moved the decimal on the percent to make it a 0.38 instead of 38%. And when I multiplied, I got 271 71. So that seems right because it's less than half, so it's got to be smaller than half the 450. So it makes sense that that's how many students actually ride the bus to school every single day, or I guess it doesn't say every single day. So, all right. Now, before moving on, it'll be interesting to see if anyone notices a mistake that I may have made in our work here today. And if you can find this, there may be another reward for you in showing me the mistake. Wink, wink. Okay. Here is your box of thought. Take your time to make sure you get good answers for these two, and then come back for the quiz. And here's your quiz. 5 problems. Go ahead and take your time, show your work. And that's it for today. We'll see you next time.